Good afternoon and happy Friday. It's Sandy Baruah from the Detroit Regional Chamber, and I'm so delighted that you have yet again chosen to spend your valuable time with the Detroit Regional Chamber and our Tele-Town Hall series. We certainly hope that you, your family, and your colleagues continue to be healthy and well. Today, I am delighted to welcome one of Michigan's great business leaders, the CEO of Michigan's Restaurant and Lodging Association, my friend Justin Winslow. Justin, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Sandy. Thanks for giving me an excuse to shave on a Friday.
Well, you know, we are all about public service, and we think shaving can be a public service, so you're welcome. Justin, is your family well? I know you've got 3 kids at home, relatively young. Everyone's healthy, I hope?
Yeah, maybe a little cramping each other's style from time to time, but we're all healthy and doing just fine. Thanks for asking.
Well, great, good. That's the most important thing. Let me remind our audience that Justin has agreed to take questions, and if you would like, please look for the question box, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen. You can pop that out and type in your questions. After Justin and I spent a little time chatting about some key things affecting the restaurant and lodging industry here in Michigan, I'll turn the program over to my friend Brad Williams, who will then moderate questions from the audience. So Justin, let's go ahead and get started. Back in April, you had a poll of your members, and I know April seems a million years ago now, but one of your conclusions was that of the 16,000 restaurants in Michigan, you know, the industry is really in free fall, and 1/3 of them may not make it. That was obviously back in April. What's the state of Michigan's restaurant industry today?
Well, not a whole lot has changed in that time frame for this industry. We've seen some of the northern regions open up, which is obviously a critical and important next step in the process. But the closure is impacting the entirety of the industry pretty dramatically. More than half of restaurants chose to be closed in the state, which means they can't really make a successful go of it doing carryout given their business model or delivery. And you know, up to 1,000 restaurant locations total could be closed by the end of May, which is where we were with data at the end of April. And so that's why you probably heard us using the term 20 restaurants every single day are going to close for good in the month of May to try to put that on a scale that people can grasp and understand, because it's a pretty big deal. That's a lot of restaurants. It's a lot of community locations that people rely on that just won't be there anymore.
Well, and it's not just the businesses, as important as that is. When you look at, you know, how important the restaurant scene has been to places like Detroit and Grand Rapids that have really revitalized their downtowns, really on the backs of restaurants and all the employees that are associated with all those jobs that are associated with those restaurant establishments.
Yeah, I mean, the city more than doubled its restaurant count from 2014 until we hit this point here. And it was such a big, vibrant part of the rebirth in the city. So much so that we created a local chapter because there was such a need in the city. So there's a Detroit Restaurant Lodging Association specifically to help meet the needs of that growing number that have grown in the last 5 years in the city. That's a challenge because I think the city is going to have a hard time, especially in some of the downtown areas where there is less residential density. And if offices are not going to go back in person in the near future, if sporting events are not going to be back, if concerts aren't going to be back in the immediate future, there's a massive lack of demand for all the supply that could be there. So that's a challenge as well.
Yeah, and the unemployment data that we're seeing nationally shows that restaurant and lodging and tourism is the #1 impacted area for new unemployment claims. So you really can't overstate the importance of the restaurant and lodging industries to our state's economy.
Yeah, listen, it's bad nationally. It's worse here. It's about 2/3 of restaurant employees, and hotels very similar, by the way. Nationally, here it's more than 3 out of 4 are unemployed that were working in this industry in February. So we're feeling it pretty acutely here.
That's right. So you mentioned that the governor had recently opened up some of the northern regions, 2 of the northern regions of Michigan, and restaurants were allowed to open. under some pretty strict conditions. So first of all, how has the opening of restaurant and lodging gone up in those northern districts?
Better than expected. Yeah, the challenge restaurateurs had was whether they'd even be able to open in a very short window. And in an ideal world, of which none of us, I guess, are living in right now, but in an ideal world, our restaurants would have had a 2-week window to build up their supply chain, because there are challenges on the supply chain, frankly, in the industry right now, to get up and ready, especially to get ready for a Memorial Day weekend up north, right? That can be a heavy traffic timeline. So to get ready in 3.5 days or so from scratch after being closed was a challenge. But I've been really impressed by the number of restaurateurs that operated at a very high level up there, and the return that we got from the guests was very high. It should be known only about half chose to reopen in that time frame. That number continues to grow the longer they have had to get their own house in order. But listen, there were a lot of possibilities of last weekend becoming a problem or a challenge. And by and large, there wasn't. Restaurateurs operated very safely, met the needs of PPE and other requirements, social distancing requirements really well, and customers came away really happy. I was very pleasant. I don't want to say surprised, but it was a short window and they did a very good job.
And we all saw the news reports of people from the Grand Rapids area, the Detroit region, all those license plate frames that were end up up north. Did the customers did they get the memo? Did they understand what they needed to do in order to participate in the restaurant experience again, or was there a lot of education that customers needed when those restaurants reopened up north?
A little bit of education for some, but I mean, those are very small outliers. The vast majority want to operate safely. They know that we're in a new environment. They know they need to be responsible themselves, not just put every onus on the operator. But for those who didn't, a lot of our operators had extra PPE, extra face coverings or masks available for guests to wear to make sure that they were following protocol, because we put a pretty big responsibility on them, whether it was fair or not. What happened up north last weekend was going to set the stage for the ability of restaurateurs across the rest of the state to be able to open. They had to demonstrate that this industry was capable of making those provisions and doing it safely, and I really think that they exceeded all expectations.
That's great to hear. And that's actually one of the messages that our organization is sending to our members is that, businesses, once you're given the green light, those businesses are going to have a very serious responsibility to do things right, to ensure that we don't have a second spike, that we're allowed to stay open, that we're allowed to continue to welcome customers back into our establishments. So the fact that the restaurant industry is off to such a strong start is a really strong sign for the rest of our businesses across the state.
Yeah. It really is. Thank you.
So what about the restaurants in the lower part of our state, the lower peninsula, if you will? How much longer do you think they're going to be able to hang on? You mentioned that 20 restaurants a day in May are going to shut for good. That's a stunning number. How much longer is this going to go on before we're kind of out of restaurants to open up?
Yeah, that's the multi-billion-dollar question for this industry right now. There are a lot of signs in the data, at least, that we're seeing from the governor and the team of epidemiologists working with her, that the trends are all going in the right direction. I mean, no more aggressively than Southeast Michigan in terms of seeing that curve dip and doing so for several weeks. Our argument from the association point has been, as there is caution to reopen in the entire state, let's say, or the vast majority of the remaining members or remaining regions, think about opening outdoor dining statewide or nearly statewide right now. It is a safer next step. It allows the supply chain time to gear up. It allows restaurateurs to start getting some reps and get ready and do so in a safe way. It's where we've seen some of the other states, some of those who have been doing reopening very smartly, for lack of a better word, and having that as a necessary step before full reintegration. Ohio did this May 15th before about a week later reopening the state to limited capacity dining. I think if there's caution to go all the way into limited capacity dining, let's find a way to get outdoor dining sooner than later. Because I mean, we're hearing from cities wanting to be as innovative as they possibly can, Detroit absolutely included. In fact, I'll be on a call later today to have that exact discussion, how we can open the city more broadly to welcome retail and restaurants out into the streets, out into parking areas that might not be used right now, how to maybe repurpose city parks for pop-up restaurants from time to time, and then what is necessary legally to change to make such opportunities possible. Because I think as we slowly move into the new normal, outdoor dining is going to be that big step of finding the safe way to get back to that new normal for the short term.
You know, that's really fabulous to hear. I mean, we're obviously seeing cities really all over the world, starting in Italy, you know, and moving to New York City and other places right here in Michigan, that are closing down streets to allow restaurants to move their operations outside. And, you know, can you think of a more pleasant way to spend a spring evening in Michigan than sitting outside of your favorite restaurant? That sounds fabulous to me.
Yeah, cafe dining everywhere. It'll be great. It'll be just like Paris.
Exactly right. So your organization has been a key voice across the state advocating for the interests of the lodging industry and the restaurant industry. What are some of the specific things that you're doing, like your roadmap for reopening, for helping those establishments restart their businesses and keep their doors open?
Yeah, I mean, the roadmap to reopening has been more successful, frankly, even than we even anticipated it being. The amount of times that website location has been hit, people are downloading and using that as a reference to reopen. So between that and the fact that we have just personal guidance, email, call us at any time to help get you through some of the difficult steps of opening. We're there for you in that capacity. And then we'll be producing and having out a hotel version of this sometime next week. Hotels were never forced to close, but they still have some of their own unique challenges and making sure guests can feel safe to start traveling again.
Now, you mentioned a few minutes ago the idea of masks and some of your restaurants up north offering masks to patrons. Now, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I have yet to figure out how to sip a cocktail and eat a hamburger while wearing a mask. How is that going to work in a restaurant environment for indoor dining?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, the general guidance is that anytime that you're not specifically eating, you should be wearing the face covering, the mask of some sort. That's a challenge. But certainly anytime you're in a common area, at a bare minimum, you really need to be wearing that. And customers by and large are following that. But obviously the ability to consume while wearing a face covering, virtually impossible, or impossible. So we understand that those are challenges, but any chance you can mitigate to slow the opportunity of transmission is something that we take seriously, and we're recommending to our members, and also putting a little bit of the onus on the guests that they have a responsibility to the other people in the restaurant as well as to the staff.
Yeah, truly, we're all in it together. So regarding masks, I assume that is the customer's responsibility to provide their own mask. It is not the establishment's responsibility. Is that correct?
Yeah, the guidance doesn't require you to provide it for them, but we've been seeing a lot of, at least in the northern regions, right? We have limited capacity to see how this is going to work on a statewide scale yet, but many places having extras and making them available, disposable face coverings for people to use. Because at the end of the day, more than the regulations, restaurateurs need to make sure that they're demonstrating an atmosphere that people feel safe to come back to, that if they want to be economically successful, they better create that atmosphere, at least in the immediate future, as people start to reintegrate into dining.
So that atmosphere of safety that you're talking about, Justin, applies obviously not just to restaurants, but to the lodging side of your members as well. What are the kinds of things that need to be done, kind of, I'm going to call it globally, on behalf of Michigan's lodging industry to send the message that, hey, it's now safe to come up north and stay in a hotel or in a motel or to go to Grand Rapids and do the same?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it's things that you would think would make sense, but in a hyper version, I guess you'd say. The cleaning of rooms will be magnified. The sanitization standards will be amplified tremendously. all surfaces, even surfaces you wouldn't anticipate being even used very often, a hotel room, are going to see sanitization standards increased. The major brands, Marriott and others, are demonstrating leadership on this already. So you'll see that to a degree you haven't seen before. You're going to see signage to a degree you haven't seen before, demonstrating to the public that they are taking these standards. For those who have used a hotel, you may have noticed the plexiglass between you and the clerk checking you in when you go in. That's going to be increasingly seen. And then a lot more, you'll see a lot more hand sanitizer, frankly, in public spaces throughout. Guidance on how to use elevators and how to spatially distance so you're not getting 8 people crammed into an elevator. And then when we're allowed to reopen amenities, whether it's pools, fitness centers, et cetera, that go along with so many hotels, you're going to see new standards in place as those things come back online, but we're not there yet.
Okay. And technology is going to play a role as well. You mentioned Marriott, they're really moving to the phone as key system, and I assume some of your members here locally are going to do the same.
Yeah, and we've seen some implement those changes already, and it is convenient. I mean, I've used that a few times myself already. It streamlines that process and avoids the human interaction that you might otherwise be concerned about having right now. So not widespread yet, but like so many other things, trends that had started before the pandemic are just going to be ramped up, almost acting like a catalyst to some of these changes you're seeing.
Well, let me ask you one more question before I turn it over to Brad Williams, the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Chamber. And it regards the Paycheck Protection Program. Obviously, that program has been very helpful to a lot of businesses across the country. How have your members, especially some of your smaller members, smaller restaurants, kind of mom and pop lodging operations, have they been able to access the PPP program?
I think the problem for this industry has not been with access. Several of people who applied received the loans. The ability to utilize them properly, to get the kind of forgiveness that so many other industries are almost taking for granted, how easy it would be to get your PPP loan forgiven, are challenges in an industry that is sort of forced closed or has seen attendees in the sake of a hotel at 10% capacity. The ability to bring back your staff, have anything for them to do, and then the very short time frame of 8 weeks is an impossible challenge for this industry to meet. So we've been spending a whole lot of time educating our members of the Michigan delegation. Pretty excited to see the Flexibility Act passed yesterday out of the House, and we're hopeful for swift action in the Senate soon, because this industry needs more flexibility, a broader timeline, and a lot more forgiveness, because right now those who take the loans, the ability to actually have them forgiven is real. It's a real challenge on both the restaurant and hotel side of the equation. And so we're happy to see some flexibility, hopefully coming across the finish line soon in Congress.
Yeah, we've been monitoring that issue really closely and working with our friends at the U.S. Chamber on that issue, and so we're right aligned there with you on that issue. That is a big issue, and fortunately, we are seeing Washington taking action and kind of bobbing and weaving as the situation on the ground dictates. So good. Well, listen, let me turn this over to Brad. Brad, the floor is yours for audience questions for Justin.
Justin, it's great to see you virtually. I look forward to the time where we can see each other at the Capitol again. But thanks for spending some time with us this morning.
Sure, thanks, Brad.
Well, I've got a question that kind of touches on something that you and Sandy have already talked about when it comes to outdoor dining. There's someone in the question room that talks about Northville, and we all know downtown Northville has a lot of great smaller establishments, and the challenge if you're going to reduce the indoor capacity in Northville. And so I want to ask you a little bit about a piece of legislation that we in the Chamber, in fact, have been working on, social districts. Is that something that the Restaurant and Lodging Association is in support of? And if so, can you kind of explain to some of the folks listening in what that could mean for your members?
Yeah, Representative Weber, just introducing, and I think we're going to see some movement on that bill and testimony on that bill next week in the Michigan House. So yeah, fundamentally critical, something that's sort of been on the fringes of alcohol regulatory reform for a while. I think that's fundamentally important to help this industry succeed in the immediate future. So if we are going to be moving the industry outside amongst multiple restaurants, if you're going to be creating the idea of pop-up restaurants in the city of Detroit and other areas, you're going to need a way for alcohol to be transported amongst these different public spaces without massive violations that no one wants to see. So these new social zones that need to be dictated and designed within cities of what they're going to look like and where they will be properly enforced. It's a great opportunity to do that as restaurants are going to pour out into streets, into parking lots, anywhere outside, frankly, the city will let them. This is going to be a big step in that direction and create a kind of environment that is fun and is hopefully going to draw some people safely back to restaurants in an outdoor capacity. So yeah, to a long-winded way of saying, yes, we are 100% in support and plan on testifying next week on that legislation.
Yeah, and I think we join you in that support, and we look forward to seeing some movement on that next week as well. You know, the next question I have talks about, you know, you're kind of as an industry, like other businesses, facing a dual threat right now. I mean, one, your members are shut down in most of the state right now. But even when they are allowed to open up, we're in the middle of an unprecedented economic crisis. And so how are your members, when they are open up, preparing to deal with that? And the fact that, you know, for most Michiganders, they just have less disposable income to spend. And, you know, oftentimes, you know, restaurant dining and going on vacations, those are treats that may be, you know, the first thing that someone cuts out of their budget. And so how are your members dealing with that and preparing to deal with that once they are able to open back up?
Yeah, that's a really excellent question, because this is not going to be a snap your fingers, restaurants are open, everything's fine. We're still going to have some pretty significant unemployment statewide and certainly still within this industry. Restaurateurs know it's going to take a little time for confidence to come back, for people to come out. And you're right, disposable income will not be what it was leading into this pandemic. So there are going to be challenges ahead, especially for these small independents who are not maybe as cash rich as some of the chains are. So we're sort of branding it as the MRLA mission to save hospitality. Some of the legislation you and I just talked about is in that capacity, but it's a 30 package or a 30 bill package designed for forgiveness, for flexibility for the industry going forward, because it's going to be, you know, restaurateurs are very creative, and I think they're adapting pretty darn quickly to try to match their product to where it can be used. So you're going to see, you know, delivery and carry out is going to be part of our new reality to a degree that we haven't seen before. So the idea of alcohol to go is another interesting concept that 30 plus states are doing and we are not. That's another way for revenue to come in for a restaurant. When you get your tacos, why not get a perfectly sealed margarita and have that get delivered or available for curbside pickup with your daily order? And so that's a way to get some dollars back in, but we're going to do everything we can to infuse cash and defer payments, get flexibility into the industry. But I think we're all going to be challenged for the next 12 to 18 months.
The curbside margarita sounds great for lunch. A few minutes away. Let's see.
That's right.
I have a question about bringing workers back, and the question is about, you know, as generous as unemployment benefits are right now and the resistance to people coming back. But and I'd like to hear your perspective on that. But I also am thinking about, you know, just my own history. You know, like many Michiganders, one of my first jobs was working in the restaurant industry, washing dishes. And so I think about younger workers, the people who are, you know, the backbone of some of your members. And, you know, will there be resistance from parents for working in the industry or working at all, I would guess. So how do you advise your members to handle that?
Yeah, it's a challenge. We know that the supplemental federal are going through the end of July. If someone is capable of making approximately $50,000 while not working, it's a challenge to get them back to some of their lower entry-level jobs that might be paying them $30,000. What we have found successful, and there's no silver bullet, but we work pretty closely with labor and economic opportunity. I think Jeff Donofrio is doing a really good job and partnering with them on the work share opportunity, right? Which allows employees to come back in a diminished capacity, anywhere between 40 and 90% of their previous hours. And it works for part-time employees now, which is really critically important for this industry. And allows those employees the ability to keep those $600 supplemental payments while coming back in a diminished capacity. It's helpful for this industry. And actually, we're going to have one of our board members up talking positively about this with the governor on stage later today, because it's what has been able to get a workforce back for his restaurant as they do carry out and hopefully build out towards dining soon. So there's no perfect solution like so many other of these questions, but that has been the tool that I think more and more of our members are realizing is very useful to them.
And we have a question in here, Justin, about banquet centers. And I don't know if you have banquet centers in your membership, but do you have any insight into how banquet centers are going to fit into a reopening of the tourism industry, where they kind of fit in with the cadence and what different challenges they might face?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, because right now we're limited to groups of 10, right? And that's pretty limiting if you're in the banquet sector. If you're into the summer wedding season, if you're into the business convention side of the equation, those are all very immense challenges for them to be able to conduct business as they need to. We know that Ohio is going to a capacity of 300 starting June 1st, starting Monday. That's a major difference from 10 and a real competitive disadvantage, as we're seeing more and more of our members who had a wedding schedule at, let's say, the Inn at St. John's, traveling south an hour and finding that they can have their wedding in Ohio. Those are dollars lost. And if you are in the Grand Hotel and you're trying to conduct some of the convention business, you're trying to get clarity. The best thing I can tell you right now is we are part of and actively involved in work groups that have started. Maybe they should have started sooner, but that's I'll leave that opinion just there. But work group about how we reintegrate these larger work group meetings, how you reintegrate banquet facilities, because there are also unique challenges as it relates to anything that's buffet style food delivery, and the challenges that come with transmission related to that style of food are a unique and even additional challenge that restaurateurs, all the other challenges they have, don't have to deal with. So I wish I had a better answer. I think it's going to be a longer time back on the banquet specific style. They're going to have to find ways to pivot for individually packaged meals, as I think we'll get meetings at a larger degree before we will get the banquet style, the buffet style of meal service.
Well, and let's be honest, no one wants to say they got married in Ohio. That's just a black mark against you.
It hurts me to even say it aloud.
The last question I have for you, and then I'm going to hand it back to Sandy. Unfortunately, the wearing of masks has become controversial. I still don't fully understand why, but we've seen reports about hostile interactions with folks in retail about the wearing of masks and the requirement. Do you have advice for your members about how to interact with people who are resistant to wearing masks, and what is the best practice there? Because you're in the hospitality industry, right? You have to treat people with respect and kindness regardless, and so that's got to be an especially difficult situation.
Yeah, I mean, what a microcosm for a hyper-politicized world in general right now, right? I mean, it's so hard as we, in general, just push for reopening. There's no ideological fervor behind it. It is an economic reality that's necessary for the industry to find a way to safely get back to work. And it's similar with how face coverings and masks go for this industry as well. It's difficult to put someone in the industry of hospitality to have to be confrontational with someone who is demonstrating a behavior that is not helpful to everyone else around them, is not helpful to that industry. And so part of the guidance, at least, that we're leading with is that someone really does need to be your COVID specific leader that knows how to interact and engage on these situations, because you are not going to be able to put a 19 or 20-year-old server in a position of telling someone aggressively who does not want to wear a face covering that they have to. And so singling and training an individual almost like you have a food safety trained manager at all times in a restaurant, a trained and capable individual who knows all things COVID related and can engage on the situation. But to the degree that restaurateurs can make these coverings available and offer it to the person, or then also tell them they can just get curbside carry out instead, is probably where a lot of these interactions are going to go. But it's an unfortunate reality of where we're living right now.
Well, Justin, that's all the questions I have right now. We look forward to the day when we can go back in and visit your members in person. But in the meantime, my family has enjoyed getting takeout from a lot of your good members on a regular basis these last several months, and I think we're going to do the same tonight. So thank you, and I hope you and your family are safe, and I will hand it back to you, Sandy.
Thanks, Brad.
Great. Thanks so much, Brad. Justin, just a handful of questions just to wrap up. Number one, why don't you give our audience your website, just in case folks want to get some more information about what you all are doing and what restaurants and lodging establishments are doing to keep everyone safe?
Sure. mrla.org is the main website. If you do /open, you can go directly to the roadmap to reopening and finding all kinds of guidance to help you reopen your establishments. And very soon we will have the hotel guidance on as well.
Great. Awesome. And then also, just where you and Brad ended the conversation about, having a dedicated, COVID person in an establishment, all the steps that restaurants are having to take to keep their staff and their patrons safe. What can we expect as consumers that's going to do to pricing?
Good question. We know that we've done some back of the napkin style math on what this is going to cost, and it's approximately $25,000 for a small-ish independent restaurant. And that might not seem like a whole lot, but for that small independent that's already operating with a very thin profit margin, that's a challenge. So that's going to have to go somewhere. Prices are likely going to increase a little bit. Polling we've done so far seems to demonstrate that consumers have a lot of empathy for the industry, frankly, and if there's modest price increases, they're willing to pay them. They want that service to be there on the other side of this for them, because restaurants mean a lot in their lives, not just as a way to get food, but a place where they gather with their friends, family for special events. They want that to be part of their communities. So, we're America's favorite pitiable case at the moment, and we will take it.
Well, I think we all agree with that. I mean, as Brad said, we are all so missing the experience of meeting our friends at one of our favorite restaurants, kind of being together. Human beings, we're all social creatures, and we kind of crave that human interaction. And while it's been kind of nice to work from home in my slippers and gym shorts, I am anxious to kind of get out in public again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, great. Well, Justin, any other last words you want to leave our audience with today?
It's going to be a long road back, but this industry is pretty creative and it is really resilient. So I anticipate some interesting innovation coming from the operators in this industry, both on the corporate and the independent side, to manage this new reality. So just stay with us. We're going to be there for you, maybe in a slightly different capacity, but we'll be there for you.
Great, awesome. Well, let me remind all of our listeners that the Detroit Regional Chamber, on our COVID response site, we have a link to the Metro restaurants that are open here in the Detroit region, and we're actually partnering with all of the local chambers of commerce across the greater Detroit region. So if you're looking for a restaurant, and I encourage you to look for a restaurant that you can visit and take advantage of through the takeout function. I know, like Brad's family, our family is relying on that a lot. So we encourage you to do that to support your restaurants, because we do need our restaurants and our lodging establishments there for us when we come out on the other side, and we will come out on the other side of that. So with that, Justin, thank you so much for spending some valuable time with us, especially on a Friday. I hope you and your family continue to be well, and I look forward to seeing you again in person sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. Hopefully on the island soon. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Sandy.
Thank you, Justin. And to all our listeners, thank you. Have a good weekend. Take care.